Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to use the equation editor in Microsoft Word. This is being done in Word 2013. It'll work exactly the same in Office 365. The equation we're going to be building is shown on the screen. Don't get excited. You don't have to understand this equation. It's just that this particular equation uses every possible equation editor function that you will need for most of your coursework in this class and in probably other classes. This equation that you're looking at is Bernoulli's equation for calculating the flow rate through an orifice plate. And later on in the course you're going to learn about orifice plate flow meters, but I promise you won't have to do these calculations. I'm again just using this as an example of how to build an equation in the Microsoft Word equation editor. So if you don't have Word open, start Word and create a new document, a blank document, and you can pause this video till you do that. Once Word is started, and I'm going to leave my document up so we can see the equation that we're building, you'll see your blinking cursor there. I'm just going to give it an enter just to give it a little bit more space. You can or don't have to. To insert an equation, you'll come up to the ribbon, up to the tabs, and click on the Insert tab. Over to the right, there is an item under the Symbols group for Equation. And this is the equation editor. I'm going to drop down the drop-down list, and you'll see that Word gives you some pre-formed equations. Like this is the area of the circle. If I scroll down on this list, you'll see Pythagorean's theorem. There's the quadratic formula, and a lot of other equations that you may or may not know. But we're going to create a new equation. So down at the bottom of this list you'll see Insert New Equation, and we're going to click on that. And you'll see that there is a box that appeared that says Type Equation Here. Now by default, Microsoft centers the equation that we're entering, and we'll work with it there in the center. Later I'll show you how you can change the position of where the equation sits. Now up on the ribbon you'll see that the Design tab is showing, and if it's not, you can just click on the Design tab to bring it to focus, and above it it says that these are the equation tools. Let's take a look at this particular equation bar. You'll see that there is a symbols group, and in that symbols group you should recognize that there's a bunch of different symbols. Right now I'm showing a lot of Greek symbols. There's a More button, so I can drop this button down and you can see even more symbols. I want you to take note that up here I'm showing the Greek letters right now. If I drop this little arrow down, click on it, you'll see I can do basic math. So now I have plus and minus and infinity, and if you hover your mouse over them, you'll get a little tooltip that also tells you what the symbol is. Come back here, you see letter-like symbols, operators, arrows. So there's a whole listing of different symbols that you might need. So I'm going to make sure I'm on basic math. You can do that also. Once I'm in basic math, I'm going to click into the equation box. Let's start creating the equation. All I have to do is type the Q. So I'm going to say Q. Now if you look, there's a space between the Q and the equal sign, and when you're entering equations without the equation editor, it's always good to put a space character between your variables and your operators. But with the equation editor, you do not have to do that. Word will automatically put the space in there. So I'm now just going to press the equal key. The next item, if you look here, is a variable with a subscript. So this is C sub D. If I come up on the ribbon under the structures group, you'll see there is a grouping or an option for adding fractions, for scripting, for doing radicals, for integrals, for large operators, for brackets, and so on and so forth. I want to put in a subscript. So I'm going to go to the scripting tool. I'm going to click on it. And in the drop down, you'll see a variety of different templates, I'll call them, but they're placeholders for putting subscripts, superscripts, both of them. And what I need is a subscript. So I'm going to use this one. I'm going to click on it. And now in my equation, I have two placeholders, one for the main variable and a smaller one for the subscript. So I'm just going to click into the main placeholder and type a capital C. Now I can either click into the small subscript square, or I can use my right arrow key and just arrow to it. And that's what I just did. I just used the arrow key and type a little d. I don't know if you can see this, but the little d is gray, which means it's still active. To get the next character in, I'm going to press the right arrow key. The cursor actually got bigger, and the gray highlighting went away from the subscript. Now, I like to use the asterisk or the star for multiplication. If I use an X for multiplication, it can get confusing if I have X as a variable. If I use the dot operator for multiplication, I've seen it get confused with a decimal point. So I like using the asterisk. So I'm just going to type an asterisk. And then I have another variable with a subscript. So I'm going to come up to the script. I'm going to choose the subscript. Do the same thing. I'm going to click into the big one, type capital A. I'm going to right arrow, type in 2. I'm going to right arrow, and then put another asterisk for multiplication. So let's examine what I have next. First of all, I have a radical. And under the radical, I have a fraction. And the numerator of that fraction is another fraction. And the denominator has a fraction in brackets that has a superscript. So let's build this one at a time. First of all, we're going to put the radical in. So I'm going to come up to the structures. Under radical, I'm going to click the radical. And I'm going to click on the square root. I get the square root symbol with a placeholder. Now I already know I need a fraction under the radical. So I'm going to click into the placeholder, come up to the structures ribbon, drop down the fraction, and put a fraction in with numerator over denominator. And it automatically puts my two placeholders in. Now I also know that the numerator is another fraction. Therefore, I'll click into the numerator placeholder. I'll come back to the fractions and put in yet another fraction. Let's put the numerator of this fraction in. So I'm going to click into that numerator placeholder, and I'm going to type 2 star. Now I need delta. Delta is a Greek character. It's found in several places in the toolbars. Now here's what looks to be a delta, but this says increment. And I could probably use that, but what I'm going to do is go to More. I'm going to switch this to the Greek letters. And then I'm going to come over where it actually says delta. And I'm going to click on delta. And delta gets added to my equation. Then I'm going to do an asterisk for multiplication, little g, an asterisk, little h. And there's my numerator. My denominator has a Greek letter rho. I believe that's the small letter r in Greek, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to go to more. I'm in my Greek letters. I'm going to find the rho, and here's rho. When I hover over, you'll see it says rho, R-H-O. I'm going to click on it, and it puts the rho in the denominator of the fraction that's in the numerator. Now let's build the denominator. I'm going to click into the placeholder. There's a couple of different ways to do this. I'm going to just show you one way because it shows you some other features. The first thing I have is I have a fraction. So I'm going to put in a fraction by, again, I selected this placeholder, fraction. I'm going to insert a fraction. Now the numerator and the denominator have subscripts. So I'm going to click into the placeholder of the numerator, and I'm going to come to the script, and I'm going to place a subscript. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to click into the denominator, and I'm going to do script, subscript. Now I'm going to click in the numerator placeholder and type a little d. I'm going to use my right arrow key, type the 2 for the subscript. Then I'm going to click in the placeholder for the denominator, type the little d, right arrow, put a 1. Note the 1 is gray, which means that that's still the active character. I need to get a parenthesis around this fraction. So I'm going to press my right arrow key. Now the denominator is selected, and I'm going to press my right arrow key again so that the entire fraction is selected. Then I'm going to hold the shift key down and press the left arrow key. Notice how the gray changed darker. What that did was it selected that grouping of characters. By holding the shift key and pressing the left arrow, I selected anything that was to the left. Now that that's done, I'm going to add parentheses or brackets. So I'm going to come up in my structures group under brackets, drop this down, and I'm going to choose parentheses, click on it, and I get parentheses around my fraction. But this has to be superscripted. It has to be raised to the power of 4. So I'm going to use my right arrow button, and I'm going to right arrow, and I'm going to right arrow until the cursor is to the right of that parentheses and this whole item is a light gray. I want to select the whole thing, so I'm going to hold the shift key and arrow to the left. I'm going to do my left arrow. Now it's all selected. It's darker gray. I need this to be superscripted. So I'll come up to the structures, click on scripts. This time I'm going to add a superscript. And now I get my superscript placeholder. I can click into it, type a 4. Notice the 4 is light gray. My cursor's up there. I'm going to use the right arrow key. Now I'm at the right level, and then I can just type -1, -1. The denominator of that fraction that's under the radical is what's selected. So I'm going to press the right arrow key, and now the whole fraction under the radical is selected. I'm going to press the right arrow key again so that the gray goes away. Once the gray has gone away, now I'm going to just press the enter key. And that created my equation. So with that one equation, you have used every feature that you're probably ever going to need to create equations in Microsoft Word.